Just giving people enough time to log in. And once we have a majority of the people registered, logged in, we will start. All right, let's get this kicked off. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second webinar in the series introducing the new Beneficial Ownership Register. I'll guide you through the first part of this session, covering the new authority model before passing to Anthony King, Senior Analyst, to show how to maintain beneficial ownership. Next week, in the third webinar, we will cover specific scenarios, such as when a trust is in a legal structure, nominee arrangement, joint shareholder arrangements, stock exchange exemptions, and other topics gathered from the Q&As in the first two webinars. As we progress, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. Members of the ROC are available to answer them as we go, and we have set aside some time at the end to address as many questions as possible. Now, before we move forward, I want to add some context and clarity to the topics discussed in the first webinar. So overall, this transition from one regime to another will be part of the upcoming assessment, the mutual evaluation assessment that we're conducting next year. And we need to demonstrate compliance both before and after. So just want to reiterate, any outstanding matters under the current regime should be settled before the new one. So make sure any required filings are submitted to the BMA before Tuesday, October 28th at 5 p.m. And then also, just wanted to make it clear, once the new regime comes into effect, the goal is to achieve full compliance as soon as possible. The ROC will be working with industry and as well as local entities, and we will structure specific webinars towards this. So ensure that you have satisfied the obligations by June 1st. Do not wait until May to do it. We are looking to try to work towards getting this register populated and all of the new requirements in prior to June 1st. Okay. So between now and then, we will also hold additional webinars to ensure everyone is aware of their obligations. So we will be getting specialized webinars out to specific groups, and based upon the level of compliance as we go along, we might even throw in some additional webinars to clear up any other matters that might be coming up. So, and also for any entities that are submitting any applications for that require ministerial consent, the BO will need to be updated prior to those applications being processed. So that would be any 114B licenses, any 129A licenses, permit applications, land applications, SAC, ISAC applications, etc. Now I'm going to move into the presentation, and hopefully this will help to clear up some of the other outstanding questions that are still not clear. Okay, so first of all, this is the new definition for beneficial owner. Now, just want to make it clear, the definition itself has not changed dramatically. So the information, so basically, if a person is a beneficial owner now, they would still be a beneficial owner after. The main differences that we did was we changed it up from a cascading approach, which is once you have found somebody that meets the first line, owns or controls 25% or more of the shares or interest, then you would stop there. Under the new regime, you would have to capture anybody that satisfies any one of the three requirements. So that is any individual or individuals who directly or indirectly ultimate or control 25% or more, as well as any individuals or individuals who otherwise exercise ultimate effective control. And ultimate effective control is defined within the Act, and it basically ultimate effective control through a chain of relevant legal entities, or any individual or individuals who exercise control over legal persons by other means. And if no individual meets any of these top conditions, that's when you would enter in the senior manager. Now, just to make it clear, current, it's more than 25%, and it's a cascading approach. So you stop at the first level. As you move along, it's 25, to the new one, it's 25% or more, and it's a simultaneous approach. And this regime is just focused on beneficial ownership. So currently, the BMA manages multiple regimes under the same network. For us, we are just concerned with beneficial ownership. So at registration and at any change, you would only be required to file the beneficial owners as defined within the Act. And also, I just want to show that we expanded the scope. So previously, there were exemptions in place for regulated financial institutions, permit companies, etc. But now all legal persons on our register are required to file. There is an exemption in place for publicly listed companies and the subsidiaries, and I will walk you through that next week. But just want to highlight that the minister can make further exemptions. And any exemptions that the minister makes will be advertised to the industry well in advance, and we'll actually be going out for consultation to see if there's any entities that the minister should consider for that route. Okay, now to get into the main purpose of this webinar, going through the authority. So I just want to make it clear that this phase right now, all we are doing is transferring over the central register of beneficial ownership and the responsibility for it from the BMA to the registrar of companies. This is not a public register. So the only ones that will be able to view an entity's records and the beneficial ownership directly will be members of the corporate authorizations team within the registrar of companies, as well as the person who has authority over that entity and also has authority to maintain beneficial ownership. And we'll be using those what has been entered to provide to competent authorities upon when they request it. Okay. So to start off with, as part of the data migration project, the initial authority to manage an entity's beneficial ownership records will be granted to the person, the CSP that submitted the application by Integra. So when you first come in, you're going to get all CSPs will have authority over the entities that they have entered the beneficial ownership information into in Integra. we will not be migrating over individuals' authorities. So for those, you would have to request that authority from the registrar of companies, and I'll go over how we deal with that, how we do that as we go forward. We've also added in some additional items. We've added the ability for CSPs to revoke authorities. So basically, if a CSP can grant authority to another authorized person, they can actually grant it, revoke it, or request it. That said, let's get into the demo. Okay, so everyone's used to seeing this page by now. This is the login page for our Registrar of Companies site. Just wanted to show you, down the bottom we have helpful links. So I've uploaded the webinar from the first webinar to our page at instructional videos. And then also, we're in the process of updating the authorization letter and providing all of the other information and forms, and that will be available November 3rd via this link. Now, just to log in and show you guys some of the options that you have available to you. So, reminder, multi-factor authentication will be required to log into your account on November 3rd. If you have the ability to do it now, I'll give you a quick refresher on how to do that. And then, but if you come in on November 3rd and you enter your name and password, you will be required to register a multi-factor authentication device, whether it's either you can use a separate device or register by email. Okay, so just some other quick tips. Here, this is where you would register your multi-factor authentication. So you can actually come in and do this today. This feature is already live. So you'll just have to, once you've logged in, select your name and go down to register multi-factor authentication. Now this I'm getting in as a person that has both the authority to maintain this entity and also the authority to maintain the beneficial ownership. So you see here, with here, I have the ability to grant authority or view authorities. Now, currently, this is the authority that I have. You cannot revoke your own authority because that would leave it with no authorities there. But if I had granted authority to another user, that authority will come up under here, and then I can then revoke that authority as well. So under grant authority, so there's three different types of authority and multiple levels, and I'm going to walk you through those right now. One, you can give a director authority. That would have to be a director that's actually registered within here, and you can actually select them to give that authority for. There's authorized agent authority. And just to while I'm thinking about it right now, as you know, we're still finalizing up the UAT testing. The upload authorization document will be required for any granting of authority. So within there, you would have to upload the letter of authorization showing that it's granting authority to the person that you're sending the authority request to. So there's authorized agent, organization agent, beneficial ownership agent, and beneficial ownership organization agent. I'm going to walk through each one of these ones right now. Authorized agent is an individual that is not linked to an organization. So for local companies, if they are managing themselves directly, that would be, authorized agent will be the authority to manage that entity's records, which does not include beneficial ownership. The authorized organization agent is when you have an organization that is managed, that you're granting authority to. So all of the CSPs, they would have an organization with all of their employees in it, and they can grant authority to manage an entity's records. Now, like I said, both of these two do not concern beneficial ownership at all. In order to get beneficial ownership, that you would have to grant the secondary ownership agent or ownership organization agent. So make it clear, you would need both. The initial authority to manage an entity's records, as well as the beneficial ownership authority to manage beneficial owners. All right. And you send right now, this is configured so that you send it out to an email. We are actually in the process of strengthening this even more by locking it down to specific users or organizations within the industry. And as soon as that's applied, we'll let the industry know about that as well. Now, just to show you, now that is also the authority to, maintain an actual entity that's on our record. In addition, you can get authority. If you have authority to manage a relevant legal entity or a beneficial owner record directly, and those will also be granted in accordance with the submissions on Integra. Once you have that record, if you have to grant authority to, you can grant authority to just this one. And when you go into a relevant legal entity or a VO, the only ones they have is organization agent or authorized agent. This one is only BO. So no one would even be able to see this record unless they had authority over it. And by record, I mean the entire, this record. This is the record that will allow you to view the full details as well as maintain these details. But you do not need authority over the URL or the official to add into another link. And just to show you a quick, let's see. So so as I said previously, if you do not have you that access the beneficial owners tab, you would need both the authority to manage the entity and I'm just gonna do, let's see. So right now I've removed myself, so I'm down as my individual user. So when you come in, you can actually request authority. This request authority goes directly to the registrar, to the ROC. And you would have to select and confirm that you're legally entitled to file documents in respect of this company, and you would upload the authorization document there. Within the authorization document, as I said, we're going to be adding in additional fields that will allow you to select the specific type of authority that you're requesting, that you're granting or requesting on these. Going back, just to show you. And I'm just going to request to do a search of this entity. because I do not have authority over this entity. So as you can see, the beneficial ownership tab does not even show up for anyone who does not have authority over this. Whereas if I do, the beneficial ownership tab is available. So we put in a lot of security around this to make sure that that it's only accessible to those who should have authority to maintain this entity. I'm sure this will be so this will be a big push that we're going for, especially within the first month, just making sure that everyone has the authorities, all those authorities are lined up. We will be sending out a separate email box, anything to do with beneficial ownership. Instead of sending it to the help center, we will send out a specific email address, and you can send any of your questions or anything you're doing directly to the corporate authorization section. And we will be so we'll make sure that everything's done. Corporate authorizations will also be reviewing and approving all authority requests for entities. So we'll be making sure that the person that comes in to request authority has the proper authority to manage beneficial ownership for this entity. And another thing I was just to clarify up. Basically, the requirements that you're filing, as I said, we're sticking to beneficial ownership. So currently, I believe under the BMA, you would supply all owners and also persons who have 10%. That's not required under this regime. So we're looking to make sure that we satisfy all of the requirements for beneficial ownership. So anyone who is a beneficial owner will be able to come in, should be on the register for an entity. And as another reminder, we will be accepting the personal declarations that have already been submitted to the BMA. And we will be utilizing a joint personal declaration going forward. So that means that you'll be able to use the same personal declaration to satisfy any of the prudential regimes requirements and for regulated entities, as well as beneficial owner. Because of course that one, as the prudential regimes have a lower threshold. So technically what that means is you will not be sending in everybody that you would send to the BMA if you do not have, you would only be sending to the registrar of companies, people that meet the requirements of a beneficial owner. And I hope that one's nice and clear. So with that, I think that covers the majority of the authority, how the authority works. As I said, once you have authority, you have the ability to grant authority further. You will also have the ability to revoke authorities. So let's spend this first time in the first week. And then also, this will also allow us to basically, by separating out the authority, if you have a large, if your CSP is very large and you have a lot of employees linked into your main authority to manage an entity's records, you can set up a sub organization and you granted the authority to manage an entity's records as well as authority to manage beneficial ownership. And just put the people that are involved in the incorporation process or any process that involves beneficial ownership, you can add those people to there and it will work basically just the same. Okay, so that way you can actually isolate it further on the CSP side or on the entity side. Okay, so that one covers authority. Now I'm going to actually transfer it over to my colleague, Anthony King. He's going to walk you through the demo, just going how to maintain an entity's beneficial ownership records, and then also maintaining a benefit actual beneficial ownership or registered registered relevant legal entity. Sorry, all the acronyms are getting up to me. Okay, so Anthony, handing over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony King, and I'm a senior analyst in the corporate authorization team here at the Register of Companies. As George mentioned earlier in the webinar, I'll be taking you through two different scenarios of maintaining beneficial ownership. The first scenario I'll be taking you through is an example of a registered legal entity updating the BO register when there has been a change in its beneficial ownership information. The second scenario will be a demonstration of maintaining a relevant legal entity's beneficial ownership details. The example I will be taking you through will be a relevant legal entity updating the BO register when it has changed its name. All right, let's begin. I will be turning off my camera and sharing my screen. Wonderful. Now in this example, there will be a change. I'm going to go to my items. I'm going to the exempted demo limited because there has been a change in the beneficial ownership of this company. In this example, the change of beneficial ownership has been from one brother to another. So we'll be going through that. So the first step will be clicking on beneficial ownership actions, and maintain beneficial ownership. We will scroll down to the individual who has transferred his shares, which in this case is Jim Doe, and we will edit. We'll go down to the bottom and we'll enter in the interest end date, which will be today's date. And we click done. Then we will add a registrable person, which will be an individual as it is the brother of Mr. Doe. Now, it's worth mentioning that if you have any deadlines or time frames, it'll be worth uploading this beforehand, as this will have a 24-hour turnaround. So this, even though it's submitted now, it will not be approved right away. So if you have a set time that this has to be approved by, I would suggest that you input this information ahead of time for pre-approval. All right. So I'll enter in the information which has been pre-populated. He has a middle name and his name and his date of birth, and we'll do a search. There is no Mr. Doe already on the register, so we'll have to create a new registrable person. Now, he was born in Belgium. Oops. Sorry, here, having a little bit of difficulty. His date of birth is 12th of June, 1971. He is Belgium and also Canadian. No. His residential address is in Belgium. And if you just allow me to populate this, which is these are optional fields. Now we must add identification. Now we've noticed that you cannot drag and drop in your identification. You have to actually and I'll just put in here his passport number. As mentioned before, there is no option to drag and drop. You have to upload. If I go to here, passport for Mr. Doe, open, and then we select the nature of interest, which is shareholding, no and no, and he will be 40%, and the start date is today's date as well. Then we can provide I guess the drag and drop is not working for that as either. So if you bear with me. And yes, so we add up evidence of the shareholding, which could be a certified copy of a share register, but more details will be issued later about what documentation we are looking for. And then we hit done. There are errors. So we have to check what the errors are, edit, and it does. So basically it's confirming that there is a middle name. And then we hit done. Click personal declaration and submit. And then you'll see that our application has been sent for review, at which point, hopefully, he'll be approved, and then you'll be able to add him to the beneficial ownership register. As mentioned previously, if this needs to be done as quickly as possible, you can pre-populate and get prior approval so this can be added at the same time. Wonderful, and you should see it in your work in process right here. All right, now we'll go on to the second example, which is a relevant legal entity is updating the beneficial ownership with a name change. So we'll go to your items, and this one here, we'll go to the relevant legal corporation, which is RE10024, and we'll click here, and we want to manage the registrable person. We go to maintain details, and please bear with us. This is a testing site, so this should not be read in error already, but when the new site rolls out, it should be fine. So we have to edit. We effectively put in when the name change occurred, which happened on October 20th, 2025. We just simply put name change, and yes. You have to upload a document of name change. So I'm going to put my change name certificate in here. Hopefully this drag and drop works, and it has. Wonderful, and we save and continue. Now we go to the details and we edit here. And we just want to confirm that everything has remained the same. We have to change the name, and they've done a very simple name change of just adding it from 1 to 10. Confirming that all other details remain the same, which they have because it's just been a change of name. And we're scrolling through. We don't need to add evidence of registration of incorporation because that's already been previously submitted. So we're doing here, everything seems to be fine. So we save and continue. And everything is edited. We get ticks here, double checking everything. This is fine. This is actually similar to before. Because of the testing site, we're still showing these reds here. However, there's no changes to be made at this point in time. And this should click green on the final site. And then we hit submit. Oh, sorry, submit down here. So we have to change that. We have to, oh, sorry, we do have to edit that. And we have to click here, save and continue. And then we can submit. And as you see, it has been sent for review. You can check our work in progress, and the maintain details is here for review. Now, that's all from my end. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and send it over to my colleague, Anthony Roberts, who will have some questions for George to answer.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Roberts, Senior Analyst at the Registrar of Companies with the Authorizations Department. Just going to go through the question and answer tab and see what questions we have available for George to either stump or challenge his expertise within this area. First question. I have a question relating to incorporations of local entities. Can an individual incorporate its own entity, or does it still have to be done by a CSP or professional? I've not been in the loop regarding this kinds of stuff for a while, but keep getting asked.
Okay, so as I mentioned in the first webinar, the CSP requirement is for all entities except for entities that have a 114B license. So that means every entity every entity needs a CSP except for local companies that have more than 60% Bermuda ownership. So if you have a 114B license and a CSP is required. If you do not have a 114B license and you're a local company, then you can come in and submit beneficial ownership information directly. I would advise if you are unclear on your obligations, then you should be going through a CSP to make sure that everything's in a line. And one of the reasons why we put in the CSP requirement is because CSPs are familiar with the regime, and they are already collecting the information that is required for beneficial ownership under the Proceeds of Crime Act. So that is another level that ensures that the information that we're getting is the adequate, accurate, and up to date.
Thank you, George. Next question. Does this change affect companies that are exempt from the beneficial ownership requirements, such as publicly listed companies? For instance, companies out of scope still enter BO information on Integra. Would they still do so?
Can you repeat the question?
Does this change affect companies that are exempt from the beneficial ownership requirements, such as publicly listed companies? For instance, companies out of scope still enter BO information on Integra. Would they still do so?
Okay, so like I said, I'm going to be going over the exemption next week. So publicly listed companies and the subsidiaries, and subsidiaries is defined within the Act, are exempt from beneficial ownership requirements, but they would have to provide proof of that exemption to the registrar of companies. And that is what I'm looking at that's what I'm going to go over next week, how you would come into the registrar if the entity is either listed on an exchange, or if the entity is a subsidiary. I'll be walking through that next week. But they will not have to put in beneficial ownership information, but they will still have to supply some information for that exemption.
Okay, next question. What if the shareholder is only transferring a portion of the shares and not the entire holding? Do you have to cease them and then add them again with the new percentage holding, or can you update somehow?
So you would not have to cease them. You can update that nature of interest. So that's actually a good scenario, and I'll look into doing that if I have time in the third webinar. But yeah, you can actually maintain a person's beneficial ownership. You can maintain the amount of shareholdings. You can maintain basically anything that's been put in. You can maintain it. So if a person was reducing, if they fall below the 25% threshold, then they are not a beneficial owner. Now remember, because you're looking at all three items. So you would have to determine whether or not that person still has significant control or such. But just relating to shareholding, you can reduce it, and that will be part of the updates.
Next question. I see you can search for an individual to see if there is an entry for them already before you add them as a BO. Does that mean anyone who searches can view personal information for individuals in the system? Or will they only be able to see this information after the application has been approved?
So, like I said, this is the different levels of BO authority. So in order to search for an individual, you would need their full name, middle name, and last name, exactly as it is in their government issued ID, as well as their exact birth date. So when you're adding an entity, you would have to have that information in order to locate an individual. And you would not, and that's the only information you will be able to see unless you additionally get the authority to manage that beneficiary ownership record. So basically, as you're going through, the same information that you enter to find that person, which you will have to have exactly, that's the only information you will see.
Next question. I understand that once a VO has been approved, no further approval is required to add them to another entity. Would further screening not be required if several time has elapsed?
Okay, that's actually a good question because it opens me up for some other information. So the main requirements that we're trying to satisfy with this new beneficiary ownership regime is the FATF Rec 24, and that requires us to actually update to verify the information. So we cannot rely on anybody else's verification. We have to independently verify that information is correct in each case. Anytime something's put in, we will be re-verifying on a regular basis to ensure everything's still adequate, accurate, and up to date. But going back to the initial part of the question, yeah, we will. So once you have been approved as a beneficiary owner for Bermuda, you will not have to get approval for that beneficiary owner again the next time you add him to another entity. Although we will still be constantly making reviews, and if anything comes up, that's when we will make a referral to our compliance unit, who can then decide on a course of action.
Are you saying that companies that maintain internal corporate books are now required to engage a separate CSP, that they cannot do this internally anymore?
So as I said in the first webinar, CSP exemptions will apply. So if you have a group structure and you have an exemption under the CSP Act to conduct business for members of that group, you can you do not need a CSP.
Also, to confirm, there will be no requirement for any owners with an interest of less than 25% to be vetted prior to obtaining ownership post November 3rd.
Okay, like I said, this regime is focused on beneficial owners, right? So that is what you're required to file. That is where the obligation stops for an entity. So it's beneficial owners, and remember, it's not just percentage. So you can't just stop at looking at the percentage. You have to look at individuals that control the entity as well.
How many layers up do you need to look at for the BO register when companies have several layers of corporate entities above them?
So we need the entire ownership chain leading up to the individual. So, and like I said, I'm stressing this. The requirements, the overall requirements have not changed much. So whereas right now, when you are going to the BMA and you will build up to the ultimate parent company, you would still have to do that with us. That's where you come in and you put in the relevant legal entities.
Is there a time frame on updating the BO? Like we have the 30 days for a director's change?
Okay, so the timeline, yes, there is a timeline, but you have to take this into consideration because, of course, something may happen, and then what? Okay, let me take a step back. So this goes off at the timeline starts kicking off at notification. So it's within 14 days of the entity being notified of the change, right? So ideally, the entity should be notified immediately. And then once that happens, you have 14 days from that date to put it in. That is the timeline. But of course, if you've been notified and you can come into us, we built our portal to be very user-friendly. So you can access the portal at any point in time and maintain those records. So I would not recommend waiting until the 14 days is up before entering it. Once you've been notified, come in. But that's the timeline. It's 14 days of notification of the change.
You said the entity must designate an authorized person to submit updates through the BO portal on behalf of the entity. Do we have to provide a board resolution giving such authority to the designated person to submit both the BO information and updates?
So this will be it'll be the same letter of authorization that you've submitted previously. And within that letter of authorization, you'll be able to select what type of authority is being granted to manage that entity's records. So you will be able to select just the main authority to manage an entity's records, and or you can select the main and the beneficial ownership records. And like I said, you need both of those in order to even access the beneficial ownership tab.
Once the BO is approved a year or 2 years ago in an entity, please confirm that you do not need an approval, no AML KYC update requirements.
Hold up. So this AML KYC is completely separate from the beneficial ownership regime. So any of the things that I'm talking about today are the beneficial owner requirements. Okay. In order to make sure that that business continues on and there's no interruptions to business for our entities, we have separated out beneficial ownership from the other regimes. As I said, the BMA was maintaining multiple regimes, beneficial owners, exchange control, their AML, ATF regimes under one system. So we're separating that out. This is just beneficial ownership. So if a beneficial owner has not changed, then you do not have to make any additional filings with us.
Okay, this is a person looking for clarity. Section 6(1)(b) defines a beneficial owner as being any individual or individuals who otherwise exercise ultimate effective control over the management. However, while a shareholder may be a beneficial owner according to general principles, that shareholder may not have ultimate effective control because it is a minority shareholder. Therefore, not a beneficial owner for the purpose of the new act, correct?
Okay, so if we let's try to keep this one to the general one. We are still working on the regulations and the guidance, and we're actually looking at putting that out to the industry and having more in-depth industry consultation to make sure that we get down all of those. But I mean, yeah, let's keep the questions focused on more general things. If you're looking at identifying who is a beneficial owner, we will be, like I said, looking at industry consultation, and if necessary, we can provide additional webinars on those after we've got everything nailed down and we've identified where people are having issues. We're identifying who a beneficial owner is.
Okay, it was mentioned that evidence of shareholding for an individual could be an extract of the share register showing that shareholding. However, if it is a new shareholder, presumably the prior approval of the ROC is required for that new shareholder before you can enter them as a shareholder in the share register. So how can evidence of shareholding be the share register which cannot be updated until approval is given?
Good point. Mhm. That's a very good question. So as I said, one of the things that one of the FATF requirements that we have to satisfy is that we verify all of the information at each point whenever it's collected. Now, verification is two things. Number one, it is verifying that the person is who they say they are and they actually exist. The other thing that we require to verify is that the nature of interest in that entity is complete. Now, each scenario would be different. So for that case, yeah, we can take that in, and I will provide an update on next week. We can have a few discussions about what evidence will be necessary in order to prove that a transaction is about to take place, because that's a new one. Any next one? All right. Well,
Sorry about
Anthony's
that.
you're back.
Oh,
All right.
sorry about that. Yeah, it was again, my computer was freezing. If the
No
three
problem.
BO criteria are not met and we resort to the senior manager as the BO, do we still need to include all relevant legal entities with the structure and the system?
Yes. You will build all the way back up to the top entity in that structure. And then you would add the senior manager. So the same way as it's done in the BMA right now.
If an organization has a CSP exemption, can more than one person within the group have authority to update BO information?
So remember, the organization is the organization as a whole. So organizations on our system are set up so that anyone within that organization can perform any of the functions. So yes, anybody within that organization will be able to make the updates. And like I said, if you have a very big organization and not everybody within that organization should have access to do that, we can set up a sub-organization and then assign the authorities over to that one.
Can you please confirm if the BO ownership will form part of the annual return filing in January?
So this as part of the new BO regime, we are requiring confirmation of the confirmation that the information filed with the registrar is adequate, accurate, and up to date. Now, in order to basically to allow entities time to get in, we are not bringing that part into effect until April of next year. So in the next annual return period, you will not be required to answer that question. In the annual return period for 2027, you will.
If a BO has more than one nationality, is only one passport required to be uploaded?
That is correct, but you would have to indicate each nationality as Anthony demonstrated within the addition just then. You can add multiple nationalities, but you're only required to answer one passport.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Let me just search through. If a CSP for a company has changed since the initial Integra filing was made, will the current CSP be the one who will have access once transferred, or will it have to be transferred to the current CSP?
It would have to be transferred to the current CSP. So basically, we went off of, and this is also to deal with privacy matters. Basically, the CSP that would have entered it would have that information. So that's why we went with the authority, giving the authority to the person who submitted the information, because obviously if they submitted it, they would know it. They already have the information. So once, like I said, not next week, November 3rd, I'm sure that first week, that's when you determine which entities you should have authority over, and then you can grant it over. Any entities that do not have the authority, they can request the authority from us. There's multiple different ways you can get authority. But I mean, in the first instance, if you do not have authority and you should, you can make that request starting November 3rd.
Okay, with the simultaneous approach to determining BOs, what if the total percentage for all BOs is more than 100%? Does the portal allow you to enter more than 100% in total interest?
Okay, so I think I understand the question. Number one, you cannot have more than 100% shareholding or 100% voting rights. So there's two different things. So the system won't, no, you cannot have more than 100% of the shareholdings of an entity, no matter how many people you have. And you cannot have more than 100% of the voting rights. But those two are separate. So basically you can add in 100% shareholdings, and separately you can add in up to 100% voting rights.
So are officers of the company completing this information in the registry, or is it our CSPs?
So, as I said before, CSPs are required to file. So if you are an exempted company, you would need a CSP to file, or you would need an exemption under the CSP Act to act on your own behalf and your group's behalf.
Okay, that about sums up our question and answer period.
I see one more question off the top that I just want to clear up. So the question was, is the BO register required to be updated prior to a new share transfer or acquisition, or can it be updated after the fact? So just to clear this up, number one, remember, we're only dealing with beneficial owners. So it's only 25% or more. If the person being transferred the shares, it does not need to be approved ahead of the fact if that person has already been approved as a beneficial owner in Bermuda. If that person is a brand new person, you should do that ahead of time. All right. So as we said, the registrar of companies has a long-standing agreement with the industry where we would allow people to make pre-submissions. We're still gonna uphold that. So we will allow you to pre-populate things, get pre-approvals, and everything else. So it should not be done. No, it should not be done after the fact for a person that has never been on the register. If it is a person that is already on the register, you do not need pre-approval for that. So once the transaction has taken place and that person has now a beneficial owner, then it falls under the same rules. Once the entity has been notified of this, then they will have to file that within 14 days. All right. So with that, yep, I think that calls to an end to this webinar. I forgot to mention the first webinar has been uploaded onto our website for instructional videos. Once we've taken out this one, we will also edit this video and post it up in the same spot. And we're also compiling all of the Q&As, and we're preparing up a frequently asked questions page based upon how many similar questions. And we're looking to have that out when we go live as well. So I'll give you more updates on that in next week's webinar. So thank you everyone for coming to this one, and I will see you next time.